Hey, live stream, Facebook listeners and viewers, we are delighted to have you with us today. And I have a very special guest, my former co host from my transition radio show, Don Meredith, is among many other things we're going to talk about today. Now he's an author, and he wrote a book called The DST Revolution. And we're going to be having some revolutionary conversation today about his book and life after 50. So please stay with us for the show. I think you're going to enjoy it. And I would love you to be part of the reunion with Don Meredith. Okay, are you ready? All right, we're just about to start that show. And remember, live stream viewers and listeners, you're backstage with us. We are pre-recording this show, so it's not going to be a perfect, polished production. You're going to see what it's really like to be recording a radio show. So thanks for being with us, and here we go. Welcome to Change It Up with Paula Shaw Radio. We are so happy to have you with us. And we have got a dynamite show today because we're having a reunion. I am going to have as my guest today Don Meredith, who was at one point my co-host on Transition Radio, which some of you may remember. And we're going to be talking today about his book, The DST Revolution. And Don is an expert in the DST industry. So you're going to be learning a lot about this very interesting kind of investment, the DST 1031 exchange. He's also going to be talking about life after 50 because Don is sort of the recreation of his life expert. I mean, this man has done so many things in the last couple of years, just since I've known him, that have expanded his life experience. And I can't wait to bring Don on and have him share with you all of the incredible things that he is doing. So again, welcome to our show. We call this show Change It Up because it's all about creating change, about wanting and being open to new things happening. Because let's face it, change is coming, whether we like it or not. And we might as well make the most with it. We might as well accept it as an opportunity for a new adventure, for new growth, because that's really what change is all about. In my work as a life transitions expert, what I'm primarily about doing is helping people deal with unwelcome, unwanted change. Because those things that happen, I mean, let's face it, we all know change isn't always wonderful. Sometimes change is a negative health diagnosis. Sometimes it's a job loss. Sometimes it's the loss of someone you love, or a relationship, or a home, or a place that you love. So change can come wrapped up in challenge. And when it does, that's when sometimes people need help in dealing with it. And that's the work that I do, in addition to being an author and a speaker. When people come to see me in my private practice, it's usually to get help with dealing with some kind of change that has come along that is unwelcome or unwanted. And by the way, if you want information about that work that I do, because some of the things I do in my treatment with people are different because I use a lot of mind-body tools and processes. Some of you may be familiar with meridian tapping. We do work with the subconscious mind. I love a lot of the new neuroscience techniques that go beyond the conscious mind, because this conscious mind of ours is only 5% of the mind functioning. 95% is subconscious. And we're all trying to create our lives with this 5%. So one of the things I love about mind-body tools is that they help people to access the 95% so we can get bigger, better results more quickly. So you can find out more about my work by going to paulashaw.com. Also, by the way, if you want to find out more about this radio show, if you want to hear past episodes, or if you are interested in being a guest on this show or a sponsor, all that information is available on changeitupradio.com. That's changeitupradio.com. So this is a special day for me. It's my birthday tomorrow. So I decided to indulge myself in not only having a guest who's a special friend to me, but also in talking a little bit about how it all began, because this person is the reason that I'm now doing a radio show. So I'd like to tell you just a little bit about what happened the first time Don Meredith invited me to do a show. This is actually one of my favorite stories. So Don was my friend from Rotary. He actually was my sponsor getting me into Rotary. And he was doing a financial show with a wonderful man named Steve Sexton at the time. And he one day asked in Rotary, would any of you like to be on my show? And I thought that sounded like a great idea. I had a new book that was out, and I thought being on a radio show could be wonderful. So I told Don I'd like to do it, and he said, great, sign me up. So I come to meet Don, and I'm thinking he's doing maybe some little internet show or something, and I'm expecting to go to a strip mall somewhere to do the show. And when I pull up at the address he gave me, I'm at a very high-rise, professional-looking building, and it says KCBQ. And I went, oh, my God, this is the real deal. So I walk in with my book, and most of you know my book, Grief, When Will This Pain Ever End? And Don is waiting for me, and we go into the conference room, and Steve hadn't arrived yet. When Steve arrives, Don says, and remember, guys, this is a financial show they're doing. So Steve walks in, he introduced to me, seems like a wonderful guy, and Don says to him, here's Paula's book, Steve. And the book title, as I said, is Grief, When Will This Pain Ever End? And I saw Steve's mind suddenly just sort of freeze, and I could hear the wheels turning, and I know he was thinking, grief, when will this pain ever end? What am I going to talk to her about? How are we on a financial show going to interview this woman? So he takes a deep breath, and he looks at Don and goes, Don, why don't you introduce Paula? She's your friend. And Don goes, no problem. That sounds great. So we go in the studio to do the show. In the first segment, they would just talk amongst themselves about financial stuff, and then they would bring on the guest. So they start talking, and they're talking a lot about retirement. In fact, they were talking somewhat about DSTs, which we're going to be discussing with Don today. And finally, it comes to the end of the segment, and I look at them and I go, wow. And Steve goes, wow, what? And I said, well, I didn't understand a lot of what you were talking about, but I think it's interesting that you talk so much about retirement. And he said, why? And I said, well, because it's such a loss issue. And Steve went, loss issue? People can't wait to retire. And I said, I know, but look at all the losses. The loss of your career identity, the loss of the familiar routine, the loss of your friends at the office, the loss of the meaning that you had in whatever your career was. And Steve's eyes light up, and he goes, that's it. And they go, and we're back. And he started asking me questions, and while I was answering his question, Don was scribbling his next question, and it just sort of took off. It went electric, and we all had a wonderful time. And a week later, KCBQ, actually on my way home, Don said, that was so great and so fun. And I said, I know, we should do our own show. And he texts me back, God is my witness, Transition Radio with Paula Shaw. And I thought, oh my God. And that ended up being exactly what we called our show, Transition Radio. And a week later, KCBQ offered us the opportunity to do that show. So that is one of my most fun, most cherished stories. And it's because of Don Meredith that I'm sitting here today with you. And now we've moved on to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. And so I want to bring my dear friend in. But one thing I want to talk about first. One of the problems in retirement, and Don and I will be getting into this a little bit more, but one of the reasons there's so much loss in retirement is because people don't plan ahead. They're thinking about what they don't have to do when they retire. They don't have to go to work anymore, but there's still 24 hours in the day. And human beings don't do as well in life if they don't have purpose, meaning, structure, passion. We need those experiences in order to feel good about our lives, about who we are on the planet and what we're doing on the planet. So I think it's really critical that we do some planning for retirement, and not just planning where we're going to live or how how the finances are going to look. What am I going to do with my life? What's going to give me meaning? And one of the questions I love most and that I use a lot when I'm trying to help people transition back into their lives after loss is, how can I be of service? Service seems to be the way back in. And it's a beautiful win-win for everybody, because those we serve, they win, and we win because now we have meaning. Now we have a reason to be on the planet. So whatever your plans are for your retirement, don't forget to include service. That's one of the reasons why I think Don Meredith and I met in Rotary, because we're both focused on being of service in the world. So after this break, I am going to introduce you in the flesh to this man who is very special in my life and who gave me my start in radio. And one of the things that you're going to find very interesting about Don is that he covered those bases in a really extraordinary way. And one of the things I'm going to ask him is, did he think ahead about that, or did it evolve naturally and he just followed the clues? It'll be really interesting to find that out, because planning is not a bad thing, and being aware that we need to expand as we grow older, not get stuck. That's really important. So we'll be talking about that in just a moment when we come back from this break with Don Meredith. We'll be right back. Okay. You're on, Manny. Yep. For the Facebook people, they know that we're just rolling because I already told them.
All right.
All right, welcome.
Welcome to be here. It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks.
And thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted.
You know, I was listening to your recap of
now,
the...
You know, we're not recording yet for the show.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, because you're the one who always taught me, save it for the show.
Okay.
Are we okay, Todd? Oh, good idea. Okay, Don, I'm going to start with your bio. So give me a minute. All right, sweetie, thank you. Okay. Whoops. Okay, ready? And you know we do 11 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. And as promised, in this segment, I have with me the first co-host that I ever worked with in radio on our transition radio show, Don Meredith. But Don is so much more than that. First of all, he's one of the early pioneers in the DST 1031 exchange industry, and has virtually hundreds of exchanges to his credit. He, as you know, was a co-host here on this radio show, and he did radio even before that. He did a financial show with Steve Sexton. He grew up in Maine, and maybe that's part of the reason why Don is a different guy. Everybody that knows Don knows that. He's not the average guy. He thinks differently. He looks at life differently. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is his book. He wrote this book, The DST Revolution, And I want to begin talking about that and then maybe expand into this whole amazing life you've created, Don. So, welcome, Don Meredith.
Well, thank you, Paula. And first of all, happy birthday.
Thank you, thank you. My birthday's actually tomorrow, but thank you.
Well, this is for tomorrow. And
okay.
You know, I was really when you were talking about how we first met on the radio. That is, it was really funny. But you forget an important part.
Oh, what did I forget?
And that was as Steve Sexton came in late. I was his co-host and host for a couple of vacation weeks. He came in 20 seconds before we went on with you.
That's right.
And it was like, he said, invite whoever you want on. So he goes, she goes, she's a therapist. She's what are we going to do? And if you recall, once we got going, he started talking about his childhood.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not normal for him. And so he was revealing things about cancer and struggles and being bullied.
Oh,
And the last thing I'll say on that show was when you started talking, I noticed the assistants and a lot of the females were paying close attention because you can see through the office, right? And right after that show, you forgot this. Susie, the assistant to the general manager, came in immediately and said, you two should have your own show.
Oh,
you forgot that part.
I did forget that, and that was so wonderful. And what about there was one other kind of fun part. Remember how you told me every week they sent your show to, who are those people that listened to it to make sure you didn't break any laws?
Oh, compliance.
Compliance. And you said every week compliance would give you minimal notes.
Yeah.
And that week they said, we love last week's show.
Yeah, and
Paula Shaw was great.
The interesting thing is they never, ever put any personal comments before on all these shows. Anybody who's a financial person knows that we have compliance, we're a little overdone there. But the interesting thing, Paula, is that, well, anyway, here we are. Congratulations. Here you are 3 years later.
I know.
And with KCBQ. And I don't think KCBQ ever had a show like this. They never had a show. It was all financially based or talk show based. And
or politics.
Oh, politics.
Yeah.
And here you are thriving in this market that there were a lot of question marks, coming in. So
thank you for saying that. That is fun, and everybody here is wonderful, aren't they? The best people.
They really are. They really are. I know this isn't a business show, so I wrote a book called The DST Revolution, 1031 Exchange into Retirement Mode, and that all has to do with people who own investment property. So the tie-in with this show is that it really is it's focused on the baby boomers. Did you know the leading edge of the baby boomers is now 74 years old?
Oh, my God. No,
and they own most of the rental property. So,
well, Don, would you first explain what is a DST? Because I'll bet a lot of our listeners don't know.
Right. Well, backing up just a second is if you own rental property, and you're now in your late 60s or 70s, you may not be you may not want to manage it anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if they just sold their property, up to 35% of their capital gains are now taxed. So it's just a painful option.
Oh.
So the Delaware Statutory Trust, the DST option, was heavily researched. I did one of the first DST exchanges back in 2002 with a PricewaterhouseCoopers CPA. And, so that's why one of the pioneers is on my book. But this is one exit strategy, and there is a few. There's this one exit strategy if you're a property owner, to sell your property, take those funds, tax deferred, pay no taxes.
That's important.
Invest into a Delaware Statutory Trust and get monthly income with no management, passive, armchair. So, but again, I know this isn't a business show, so I've had a lot of fun with the book. And just the fact that I wrote the book.
Amen. Because I want to tell another story on you. When I first met you, I was launching my book. And I remember one of our first coffees, you said, I want to write a book. And you had this book in your mind, and you had the cover designed in your mind. You had it all there. And that was something that you were really trying to push yourself forward to do until a mutual coach of ours said, maybe that's not what you're supposed to do right now. Maybe it's not the time.
Well, I believe everybody has a book in them.
I think you're right.
And so I did 5 chapters, and that was it. I didn't have any more thoughts coming in. It was painful because I not only did I have the cover in mind, the cover was done.
Yeah.
And but it was painful, because I said, I'm just going to be another guy who said it, or lady who said, I'm going to write a book and doesn't.
Mm.
And the fact is that when I had this book idea, the ideas never stopped. So, if you're on the right topic, the words will come, right?
That's so true.
And so this coach, she was a teacher at MIT and a lot of other places, loved this lady. She took 30 seconds and looked at that book, and she goes, that's not you anymore. You've moved on from this topic. Stunned, but I agreed with her.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think it's interesting. I think everybody has a book in them. And I listened to a coach for attorneys talking, and he says, if I ask questions for 3 hours at a bar, and your answers and my questions, there's your book. Just write like you're in a bar. And I believe a lot of people, but anyway, the process was interesting.
It's an amazing process. Nobody who hasn't done it can quite relate. But what I say about writing a book is, from the moment the idea is conceived in your mind, it haunts you until you write that last sentence. It's like you want to go play, you want to go out to dinner, you want to do other things, but there's that book going, you could be spending that time writing me.
So wouldn't you say it's important to open that Word program on your computer and start typing? You don't have to have the answers. You don't have to have the ending.
That's right.
And at some point, you can get an editor to unscramble your mess if you have one, and you probably will. That's what I did.
And you know what I find too, Don? When I read my books, half the time I'm going, I don't remember knowing this. It's like it came from somewhere else, or the best parts do anyway. It's like you start with the idea that's clearly what you know, and it's maybe what I was talking about in the first segment: conscious mind versus subconscious. The subconscious is so huge, and it's had so much experience. The conscious is only 5% of our mind functioning. So the conscious has the idea, and maybe the conscious writes the outline. But I think once you sit down and you actually start typing words, a lot of that comes from your subconscious.
Yeah, and you can collaborate with others on your book, and they can help. Once they believe you're for real,
right?
It's going to take some weeks.
That's
right?
so true.
The ideas will come flowing in, and I find the same goes for painting.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I started painting after 50.
Yes.
And I've watched, and I've taken classes for years. I've painted under somebody out in Rancho Santa Fe, but I've watched people come in from scratch, day one, knowing nothing, start drawing. Could have a 7-year-old right next to you. They may have 2 years on you. But the interesting thing about painting is I now believe you can be taught, because a lot of people will say, what? I don't have any talent.
Right.
Well, are you willing to take classes? Because I think anybody can be taught.
That's true. I am a perfect example of that, because I grew up always saying, oh, nobody in our family has artistic talents. And I thought that was true of me.
Hear it all the time.
First time I went into a charcoal drawing class, I did a bowl of fruit. And I have it hanging on the wall in my office, because everybody, real artists who would see it would go, this is great. Who did this? I go, this was the first thing I ever drew, and I didn't believe that I had any talent.
I wish you could come into this class and just observe humanity, because I see women and men who come in and say, my father said something really bad to me in high school about, look, go become a student, because you're never going to have any talent and make any money from this drawing. And for some of them, it was so scarring and damaging, that comment. It took them in their 40s, 50s, and 60s to come back to that art class and take up the damage their dad did to him, or mother.
Yep. And the message
it's nonsense.
there is powerful, John. So powerful, Don, because the message is, don't let anybody stop you. Do what your heart is calling you to do. Don't buy into what they say.
They don't know what they're talking about.
That's right.
Do they know the complexities of the universe and your mind, God, whatever.
Right. Exactly.
They don't know that.
No. Nobody's a better authority on you than you. And we will be talking more about you when we come back from this break. And I want to also get one more clarification from you about the DST before we go on with the other parts of expanding life in 50s or beyond 50s. All right, we will be right back. Okay. Are you ready? Let's just do it.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I need a quick note here.
We can talk about acting, life discovery.
Yeah.
What's inside you? That's what I want.
Okay. Oh, I love
What's
that.
hiding in it? What's hiding in it?
Okay. Love it. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. We're being brought to you today by Tom Palladino's Scalar Energy Healing. And you can get a 15-day free trial of this amazing cutting-edge energy healing therapy by going to freescalar.net. That's spelled FREESCALAR.net. And I have done it, and I swear by it, so give it a try. All right, we are back with Don Meredith, who is a man of many talents. He was my former co-host, if you're just joining us. He is a financial guy. He's an artist. He's an actor. Oh, the man has no end to his dimensions. And we were just talking about his new book, The DST Revolution. And I want to just get a little bit of clarification for our listeners on, if I understand this correctly, Don, tell me. So what you were saying in the last segment that makes so much sense. If people own rental property, but they've gotten to a place in life or an age where they don't want to get the call about the toilet overflowing or the lawn didn't get mowed or that sort of thing, and they just want out, but they don't want to lose a lot of their profit in taxes, they can buy into this Delaware Statutory Trust, which now, do I understand this correctly? It's like a conglomerate of real estate properties?
It's a business entity trust. It has its own name, Delaware
Okay.
Statutory Trust, and there's property, institutional grade, really good stuff, property inside of it.
Okay.
And so it's a monthly income replacement from your property.
Mm-hmm.
You get all the tax write-offs, renewed depreciation, and all that good stuff if there's debt on it. It simply allows right from page 1 in the book, I start out kind of with a TED Talks format where I start telling stories about real people.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows somebody who owns investment property sell their property, bring the funds into a Delaware Statutory Trust, totally tax deferred, immediately start getting monthly income from the property in the Delaware Statutory Trust. Every year you'll get a 1099. And that's it.
So I imagine there are some people this is ideal for and some people it's not. So who's the right candidate for it and who isn't?
Well, we have to make sure it's a good fit, and we're audited and regulated to make sure it's a good fit as well.
I like that.
And so we have to do some planning. It's not just a transaction. And so, we have to have a thoughtful conversation about, what the rest of their financial life looks like. What's their liquidity? What are their issues? Do they need liquidity? For a lot of folks, they have income property that wasn't liquid before, so they're coming into a Delaware Statutory Trust that, again, is not liquid. They can't sell it anytime they want. But there is planning. So we have to do, we're not tax planners, but we have to work with their tax people and CPAs and see if it's a good fit.
Yeah.
And so that's important.
So is there like a certain amount of time a person should plan to be in the trust? Is it like a long-term deal, 10 years, 20 years?
It's long-term being 6 years to 10 years.
Okay, that's good to know. So if you want to get into something, but that you could get out of in a year or two.
Wrong
thing.
It's not going to work.
You're not the candidate.
But most people are fine with that. They want to know what the parameters are, but they're fine with that. And I have a lot, over the years, I have a lot of happy retired DST owners because, they are not doing anything. They don't have to answer any phones. They're totally in the retirement mode.
Yes, I love that because I was just talking to a friend the other day. She and her husband are moving back from Germany, and they want to buy a house, but the house they fell in love with has 10 acres of avocados on it. And she said,
sounds expensive.
We don't want more work now. We don't want to become farmers. We want to be able to have income, but not a lot of extra work. And that's what I think you provide with the DST. Right?
You know, it's a quick read. It's on Amazon. The DST Revolution is on Amazon. And if anyone calls the show, we'll send them the ebook for free.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Great.
Just let us know what your email address is.
And, you know, I want to tell our listeners, too, especially the ladies out there, I'm not a financial expert, but I got to tell you, this was a really easy read. And Don is just clear, concise. As he said, he uses a lot of stories that keep it interesting. You don't have to be a financial expert to learn from this book.
Well, you know what we're all about is freeing up time when you retire. You know, one of my great friends, former PricewaterhouseCoopers CPA, and he's a financial guy in Detroit, and he said, I am actively telling people in their 60s to spend money and enjoy their life. He's reminding them, you know, you've been saving all your life, and you may have forgotten, you may not know how to spend it. Because
that's interesting. You don't hear anybody saying that.
I'm telling you, I was surprised to hear him say that, but he says, I am banging the desk, telling people, get out and spend money and go to restaurants you normally think you can't afford. And I said, what's this all about, Mark? He says, I am finding out that people have spouses that get sick, injured, die in their 70s quite often. And it occurred to me, I had an epiphany. Spend your money. And it kind of goes along with a guy you've had on the show, the author of Plan Your Escape, the great travel book, Wayne Dunlap.
Oh, yeah.
What is Wayne always saying? If you're not on his Facebook, you should be. So many ideas. He's always banging the drum saying, enjoy today. Enjoy today is his big message.
The most important message.
And so I'm finally starting to get that. But, you know, Paula, so the whole idea of the book is to free up time from these property owners, but it's into a fascinating study into baby boomers, the millennials, and really freeing up your mind to be open to other things.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was so inspired 10 years ago by Jonathan Ives, the chief architect of Apple Computer, when he was interviewed. And he said in a very soft voice that ideas come in a whisper. And since then, I've really been listening.
Oh, I love that.
And I advise everyone else to listen to that whisper, because I believe hidden deep within us is something you forgot you wanted to do. I took up acting 3 years ago.
I was going to ask you about that.
It's something I buried inside me in my 30s. I said, well, that's going to be for another lifetime. And I was at this church. I hadn't belonged to a church since I was 11 years old. Really interesting church in Rancho Santa Fe. And there was a program, and it said auditions this afternoon. They have a really serious theater there. And without any thought, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did you hear that book? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I went. And the director said, any experience? I said, well, I had a radio show, done a little TV. A week later, I get an email, and I'm on the cast. The only thing interesting about that, Paula, really, it's my point, is I thought that dream was buried when I was in my 30s, out of my life forever.
Right.
So what is deep inside you when your mind is quiet and you get all the work out of the way? What's in there?
You know, Don, it's so interesting you bring that up, because I am my current crazy thing that I am going to do. Haven't got a plan as to when yet. I want to walk the Camino in Europe. Have you heard about that?
God, yes.
And I'm reading a book. The author's going to be a guest on my show. It's called The Camino Within. And I'm telling you, I already see myself there. And it's crazy. I was talking to my daughter about it, and I'm like, okay, I'm reading cold showers, sleep in a giant room with a bunch of people. You know, you're walking all day. You don't know necessarily where you're going to be that night.
There's a movie, you know, Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez.
Was my first,
have you watched it?
That was my first inspiration. The Way, it's called. And then I'm getting chills as we're talking about this, because it is haunting me. And it's totally crazy, because I can't bring the hairdryer or the face cream or the straightener or any of that stuff, Because I don't want a lot of weight on my back because, then that'll be painful. But I know I'm going to do this.
Well, what is it? Tell the viewers what it is.
Oh, yes. For any of you that don't know, the way is, I believe it's called the Camino de Santiago, and it is a over 600-kilometer walk from the south of France to the coast of Spain. It's a pilgrimage walk in Europe. And right here in this building where we do this show, Danielle, the lady who owns the coffee stand downstairs, has done it.
You're kidding me.
She took 2 months off. She spent 42 days walking the Camino. Yeah, we got to talk to her after the show. And everybody I've talked to, including the author of this book, The Camino Within, say you are never the same. It completely changes your life.
Paula, I don't care whether you're an engineer or whether you're, just an artist. There is something inside you that I bet you gave up when you were 20, 30, 40 that is still there.
Yeah, I think that's true for everybody, don't you? Because we get this idea of what we're supposed to do, and we're supposed to get married, we're supposed to have a family, we're supposed to be responsible.
We have to make a living, and so we push everything out of the way because we have to pay the rent. We have to pay the mortgage. And that process pushes a lot of good stuff out of the way.
That's really true.
But it doesn't go away. Mm-hmm. It does not go away. Mm. Listen carefully in a quiet room. Make room for it to surface.
See what that inner voice has to say.
There's some cool stuff there.
Oh, yes. I think that's true for every one of us. Every one of us. Because we become planners because of that, having to earn a living and take care of our children and all that, instead of people who trust that the day will take care of itself. And that's one of the things this author brings out about the Camino. You don't know in the morning what's going to happen that day. I mean, none of us really do on any day of our lives, but we think we do. So we have that false sense of security. But when you really step out and do something brand new like you did, or do this walk that we're talking about, you're stepping out. So when we come back from this break, we will talk to Don about some other ways that he has stepped out and expanded his life experience. We'll be right back. Woo! As always, this is going where we didn't know. Yeah. So this is the last segment already.
I was only here for one segment.
I know. It's reunion day. So this is actually the last segment of the show. So midway through, I'll do some stuff to close it up. But let's talk about just the art. And I'd like to ask you a couple of things about just getting into art, getting into all the stuff that you've gotten into, acting and art and writing your book. What's the most important thing you learned?
Stop saying that I'm not any particular type. Stop saying that to yourself.
Okay, that's good.
Right?
All right, let's talk to him about that.
You start to convince yourself.
And you limit yourself, right? And we're all, by the end of our life, we have so many limitations, we didn't do what we wanted to do. Right. That's what I heard you saying. I love that. Okay, Facebook live streamers, you just caught all the between the segments chit-chat. We're going to get on with the last segment of this show. And welcome back to Change It Up with Paula Shaw Radio. We are being brought to you today by Tom Palladino's Scalar Energy Healing. And you can get a free 15-day trial of this cutting-edge energy healing by going to freescalar.net, spelled FREESCALAR.net. And back with me to close the show today, my special guest, Don Meredith. If you've just joined us, he was my original co-host on Transition Radio, the show before this one. And we've been talking today about his new book, The DST Revolution, which is only one of the things that he's done. You know, our whole theme today is life after 50. How do you expand your life in those later years rather than just get stuck and stagnant? And Don's such a perfect example of somebody who's done that. So we've been exploring some of the things he's done. Besides authoring this book, which just was released and is a wonderful book, he now he's also become an artist, a really a good artist. Like, I love his paintings, and I'm pretty critical about art. He has been doing stage acting, and even has had a part in a documentary. So, Don, I think we need to tell our listeners, what's the secret sauce? How did you get going in these things? Or what inspired you? Why did you expand your life at this point instead of just kicking back and letting it become smaller?
I think stop defining yourself, with words. We're so much bigger.
Mm.
So stop saying, I'm not, I can't, I'm not that type.
Mm.
I think the message to your brain when you say that is reinforcing something that's an old track from years ago. And it's just yakking, and it doesn't even know why.
Yes.
And it's a lie. It's a lie. Oil painting taught me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing classes under Albert Martin out in Rancho Santa Fe for some years now. But watching people come in, as I mentioned earlier, from the start, and some of them in their first classes really look horrible. I mean, they really look like, wow, okay, they're really bad at just the basic drawing. Mm. And I was, by the way. Mm. And then you watch them. There's one lady from England. This is 2 years later, and she is painting things Monet inspired, things that blow my mind.
Wow.
And every time I see what she's working on, I go back to her first 10 classes, and I'm going, you have got to be kidding me. But, if you just keep going to classes, you're going to learn how to paint. And the great thing about oil painting is anytime you don't like something, you can just paint over it.
Yes.
I have a ship that I've painted 10 times. Nobody knows that. And isn't that great in life? If you're not good enough at something, you just keep working at it.
Yes.
And by the time you see my painting, nobody knows the ship's been repainted 10 times and that I've collaborated with a bunch of, fellow artists to get the angles and everything right. So isn't that about life? If you work on something, you can keep redoing it.
Yes. So it's not necessarily that there's magic. Some people are gifted with this and some people are gifted with that. If you want to learn and you want to take the time and do the work, you can do it.
I talked about the book Outliers many years ago up in a party in Santa Monica, and this really handsome 6'2" guy from India who was a researcher at Mount Sinai. And I said, "Oh, isn't that great? You're a researcher. I bet your father was too." And he goes, "Yes, he was. But what are you taking away from me? The 500 weekends that I worked and my friends are out at the bars?"
Amen.
And then he turned me on to that book, The Outliers, which simply says, whether you have talent or not, if you train and persist, you'll catch up to the ones that had the talent sooner or later. That's what I find.
That's so true. I've been lately working with the 10 scrolls that Og Mandino created in The Greatest Salesman in the World. And one of the messages of the scrolls is, I will persist until I succeed. And I love that. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's not that some of us are gifted and some of us aren't. Some of us can do. Yes, we all have different things that we're better at. But what I hear you saying is take a chance. Take a chance and learn something new, beside the fact that that's really important for your brain.
Are you coachable or aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a student or not?
Yeah.
Become a student.
That's it.
Learn to paint.
True. Yeah.
Learn to do anything. What's deep inside there, wanting to come out. Let them out.
And, just plain neuroscience has taught us that as we grow older, we need to learn new things to keep our brains functioning well. It's super important. So it's not just something to do. It's actually something to enhance your health, enhance your ability to think clearly, and to function effectively.
And I'll tell you what's great in my life that changed from years of business is collaborating with artists. I love being around artists because they, like Jonathan Ives from Apple Computer, who said, whispers, ideas come in a whisper, and they're very fragile. Artists go, oh, I dreamed about this last night.
Yeah.
I think I'll paint it. They don't take that lightly. And actors are kind of the same way. And so it's nice to collaborate with artistic types now and again.
Yeah. I didn't know about you that you had the acting dream in your 30s and then you put it away. I only knew that, one day you were doing one thing, and the next day I'm hearing Don starring in this play that's going to be at the Village Church in Rancho Santa Fe. And now you've been in every production they've done, right?
My first play, 400 lines, because of my radio background, and they didn't have anyone else to fit. But I really believe that everyone has a lot of stuff inside them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Earlier you said everyone has a book inside them. I believe that too, because everyone's lived an interesting life, whether they think they have or not. Everyone matters. I had an author named David McNally, who I just love, on this show earlier, and he wrote a book called Mark of an Eagle. And basically he says everybody comes to the earth to make a mark. And it's just up to us how big we want that mark to be and what's important to us that we want that mark to be about.
How about just writing the book for yourself? Don't worry about
Yeah,
if it sells,
that's a great idea.
if somebody likes it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the bonus is you can always get an editor. Somebody who consulted with the New York Times bestseller said the most important thing is an editor.
No doubt about it.
I mean, come on. Anybody can get an editor.
Yeah,
and
that's very true.
put all your jumbled ideas together.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. So one of the takeaways I'm getting from all that we're talking about today is we're all capable of going after a dream or a goal or whatever it was that we thought was going to happen with our life that maybe hasn't happened yet. It doesn't matter if you're 50 or 60 or even 70,
we
right?
We bury so much. Come on, you did.
Yeah, of course.
Let the child out again. Mm-hmm. Let the child come out and play.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins says he carries a picture of himself when he's 7 years old in his wallet, and every day he takes a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of collaborates with the little boy.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's nice. Well, one of the things I'm working on creating this new clearing system, this healing system. And so the three things that I encourage people to look at that they're making decisions from, one is from their limiting beliefs that are in the subconscious mind. The second is traumas and experiences we've had in life that created fear. And the other is genetic signatures. We now know from the field of epigenetics that our ancestors didn't just give us our hair color, our eye color, and all that. They passed on to us their responses to traumas, to life. So if we came from kind of scared, stiff people, we don't have to be stuck with that same response. But the way out is by doing exactly what we've been talking about today. It's by making a choice for yourself, being willing to learn something new and do the work. And then there's no limits. Then you can put your passion into everything you do and have an amazing life. So Don, I'm so excited about what we've talked about today. I'm excited about your new book, and I'm so delighted that you have found this secret sauce for really making your life better every day. Oh, and let's not forget, you married an amazing woman who I love, named Brenda.
Nice to have a supportive wife. Doesn't help. Hurt.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. It does help.
It does help.
It definitely does.
I was just thinking of the worst case scenario of opposites. I saw this woman become an actress who was a court reporter for 20 years, and she said, I grew up Asian where kind of old school, we were taught not to speak unless spoken to, and then I'm a court reporter for 20 years where you don't speak,
right,
even if you're spoken to, and she was the shyest person I know and became a great actress.
So anybody can do anything. I love that story. So I want to just thank all our listeners for being with us today. Thank you, Don, for making this a real birthday treat for me. And you can hear our show or past episodes on the Change It Up Radio website, changeitupradio.com. You can find us on Change It Up Radio Facebook and Instagram. And we are on every major podcast platform. So if you can't remember any of those things, just ask Alexa. And be sure to join us next week. We really love having you with us. And remember, your job this week is somewhere, somehow, in some part of your life. Change it up. Thanks for being with me today, Don.
It was wonderful, Paula.
Bye-bye. Come back and say it so you can talk to the Facebook people. So, Facebook live stream listeners and viewers, thank you for being with us today. Wasn't this fun?
This was so fun to be back here. You know, it doesn't seem like it's been but a few days where
I know.
we used to work together every day.
And it went so fast. You know, when you're interviewing people, it can either go so fast and be such a treat, or sometimes it seems like, wow, was that segment an hour? Today flew by. Thank you, Don, for being here with me.
It was wonderful, Paula. And remember, you can change your life. Don't buy into the old track. Change it anytime.
Amen. Change it up. Bye-bye. Thanks for being with us.
Bye.